What's going on, guys? Welcome back. Hope you all had a fantastic weekend and enjoyed the Spring Everchosen Invitational with some cracked out vermin and Ola skinks on full display. Cool tournament, lots of new units and lords unveiled on the battlefield for the first time, and the Cult of Sotek and Clan Scryer got lots of time in the limelight, which is ultimately what you guys want, right? No fun if we put on a showcase for all the new units and then don't bring anything that's actually new. Now, the livestream had its fair share of issues, obviously. Twitch was screwing up pretty hard for me on day one. I don't know why, but it was stuttering like crazy, so I switched over to YouTube, and then Steam crashed, and it crashed like Wall Street on Black Tuesday. Horrible timing for the whole thing. Never seen that before, but we had a global outage for more than an hour. But they did really well with what they could with it. I mean, they came back and worked their way through all the jank, so I want to give a big shout out to Dogbert, Turin, Italian, Janet, Sotek, and the rest of the CA team for putting on an awesome show and working their way through some stuff that was completely out of their control. As most of you guys know, I played Felkon in round 1 of the tourney, stoking the flames of the Cold War, East Coast US versus the frozen tundras of Moscow. He's a really good player, one of the best in the world right now, and very experienced in the competitive scene. So I had my work cut out for me over the weekend, and what I wanted to do today is just analyze my games from the tournament, talk about army compositions, the thinking behind our picks and what we were doing on the battlefield itself, what went right, what went wrong, and what could be improved or changed going forward. Gonna show some gameplay from the stream as well. CA has given me permission to do so, but as you might imagine, it's not gonna look great. It is essentially going through like 3 or 4 rounds of compression, which means it will probably be pretty blurry and ugly in the final product. And I am not allowed to record any gameplay myself yet, so I can't do that. So we're gonna have to stick with this ghetto setup for now, but hopefully this should be enlightening and informational all the same, give you some insight on the player's thought process and all that. So let's get into it. One of the cool things about these tourneys is that we usually get a bit of time to prepare beforehand. So in the day or two leading up to the Everchosen, all the players join up in Discord and talk about strategy, talk about tactics, do some testing, and then play a bunch of games to figure out what works well and what doesn't. And because we all know the game pretty well, we're all practicing with really experienced players, we get up to speed pretty quick. But we don't learn everything, obviously. We can't learn everything. Real metas usually take at least 2 to 3 weeks to mature and develop, and that's only once everyone in the community gets their hands on the new content. You're not going to be able to get a legit new meta and figure out everything when you're only testing with 8 other people. So one of the really cool things that characterizes these early tournaments, though, is the importance of army composition. And army composition is obviously always important. Building your army is a huge component of Total War multiplayer, but I'd argue it's even more important here because people are still learning practical battlefield applications for units, which means something you didn't game plan for can seriously catch you off guard. And a huge part of this game is anticipating builds, right? You can have perfect micro all day long, but in a game like Warhammer 2, if you brought the wrong build at the wrong time, it can be incredibly difficult to win no matter how good your micro was in a certain game. On the flip side, if you bring the right stuff in the right scenario, that can cover potential micro mistakes and still breeze you along for a relatively simple victory. So the first matchup I played against Felkon was my Skaven against his Lizardmen on Southern Chaos Wastes. Skaven have a bunch of new toys to play with now, obviously. Warlock DLC, Rattling Guns, and Doom Flayers alongside their Regiments of Renown. And let me just say, the Skaven are in really good shape right now. Lots of viable builds, some very, very scary and very powerful units that really help them kind of utilize a lot of different tactics that they weren't able to do before. Now, early in my practice games with Soothsayer and Arocrastic, I tried an onion style of play with Jezzails in the middle. Basically send in hordes of slaves and clan rats, bring a ton of rat ogres in the back line as support, force your opponent through wave after wave of bodies, all the while sniping out the dinos and the high value targets, and then use the Rogers to protect your back line against all the fast movers. And that's a build that can absolutely work, but I realized pretty quickly how difficult it was to protect my Jezzails from all that mobility. And with that particular build, losing your Jezzails without generating much value is kind of a death sentence. If Sooth could get in on top of my weapon teams at will, I knew Felkon could too. Protecting 3 or 4 weapon teams against all the cheap cav, all the skinks, all the flyers, and all the new stuff Lizardmen can field is just super difficult. Even the cheap dinos like Feral Bastiladons, 650 gold, cause terror, bonus versus infantry, they can easily tear out the front line pretty quick, get in there, and then start causing a lot of havoc in the back. So I was thinking, maybe I shouldn't be doing that kind of build. Protecting 4 weapon teams is incredibly difficult with all that speed, all that terror, all the mobility. So I wanted something more reliable, easier to pull off, and less micro-intensive in high-pressure situations. And more importantly, something that might actually catch Felkon off guard, because that kind of layered Jezzail build, the onion style of play, was what most people were doing. So I went for Lord Skrulk. 2 Hell Pits, a lot of Slaves and Clan Rats, a Doom Flayer, it gets Zap Zap Cannon, the Albino Council Guard, a unit of Rat Ogres, and Poison Wind Globadiers. And the strategy was pretty simple. Doom Flayer puts pressure in the center, mowing down skinks from the word go. Like right from the start of the match, send him forward and kind of cause him to get hung up on the Doom Flayer. Now, Doom Flayers are an amazing unit. Huge bonus versus infantry, great speed at 72. More importantly, though, they seem to have a very small hitbox. They just don't take much damage from missile fire or in melee, and their attack animations are super good as well. They actually beat Empire Knights and Great Swords without losing a model, which is pretty crazy, and they do that without cycle charging either. They can go in and just hang out in the middle of Great Swords and easily win. And they get up to 124 armor when they're in melee. So their job is to dive into the Lizardmen early by themselves and force the big monsters or cavalry to respond. If those units don't respond to them, the Doom Flayer gets a ton of free kills on infantry. If they do respond to him, then the Warp Lightning Cannon targets whatever chases after him, right? So if the Doom Flayer goes in, then their Carnosaur or their Kroxigors or their cavalry that tries to chase after it gets in range of the cannon and gets blown to smithereens. And the really cool thing about the Zap Zap Cannon is that it also adds a 10-second cooldown or ability recharge value every time it hits somebody. So if there's a general that just used an ability or a spell, hit them with that and it'll be 10 more seconds before they're able to use that spell again, on top of their already set cooldown. So, a couple cool things about this build. The Hell Pits make it impossible to goon Lord Skrulk. You just can't do it. It cannot be done. 10 and 1 cannot get on top of Skrulk with the Ripperdactyl. No Carnosaur or Dino is going to want to get anywhere near that because it's a huge HQ centerpiece in your unit. You got huge mass, huge bonus for large, huge AP. Like anything gets near 2 Hell Pits and Skrulk, they're probably going to die. And the Hell Pits are going to terrify all the skinks and have a ton of summon support as well. So obviously with Hell Pits, low armor, don't want to send them into melee unsupported. You want infantry nearby, and Skrulk can do that. He can keep summoning Clan Rats and Plague Monks and all that, and it really helps. And anything that comes in close gets summons behind them as well. It pins them in place, and then the A-bombs and Papa Plague can kind of just pound you into oblivion. The Council Guard makes him even more unkillable with the Guardian Aura. So Skrulk gets that extra 20% physical resist, and you basically just create a pocket around Skrulk while he nukes infantry with Rod of Corruption, and Liber Roboticus is their highest value unit. This worked super well in practice. Won with it against Aerocrastic and Romulan Dogs Lizardmen multiple times, and it just worked really well. The drop rocks from the Pawok Sentinels would always hurt the Council Guard. That was a unit that I saw a lot in my practice sessions. I was expecting to see it, but no Cav unit or Flyer was able to get in afterwards and shut down the cannon in those practice games. So they would drop rocks, they would hurt the Council Guard, but they'd still be at half HP, and then suddenly it's very hard to kill that unit anyway. I mean, they've taken some damage, but they're still able to kill off Cav, they're still able to give the Guardian Aura to Skrulk, they're still doing a lot for you. So there was no easy way for them to finish them off. But there were a couple picks from Felkon's build that threw a wrench in my plan. For one, I did very little practicing with or against Lord Croak. Nobody used him against me in the Skaven vs. Lizardmen practice, and I didn't use him at all, so I didn't really know what he was capable of either. I mean, I knew like what his spells did, but I didn't actually use him and be like, oh wow, he can like one-shot stuff. Managed to beat Croak with Chaos in one of my practice games with Turin, and so it didn't really imprint on me just how dangerous he could be, because I dealt with him just fine in that game. I was expecting a very wide build for sure, lots of skinks, a decent amount of flyers, but he went heavier in the air than I expected with the 4 Pterodons, and went with the Jav Throwers instead of the Fire Leech Bolas. I figured Bolas would kind of be the play here, honestly, because they'll chunk through most Skaven infantry super easy, and give the skinks the support they need on the front line with those explosions, but that ended up being Croak's job, and instead the Pterodons brought the Javs, which were really good against a couple of the units that I brought. The tough thing for me about the Croak pick, alongside 10 and 1, was I had nothing good to Liber Roboticus in this game at all. No good target whatsoever. Strip bare on a Ripperdactyl with no spells, I think 10 and 1 is less than 1200 gold. Super cheap, and that's what Felkon brought. He doesn't represent a very big threat to my army in the first place, he has no spells, and he's super inexpensive. His only purpose is to just be annoying, maybe land in the back and do a little bit of tying down there, and maybe goon Lord Skrulk in a late game situation. But again, Skrulk is gonna have that Hell Pit Abomination HQ center in the middle of the army for the majority of the game. So 10 and 1 can't land there, and if he does, he's going to get pounded. And one of the things is, I definitely think that Felkon should have expected me to bring Ikit Claw and not Skrulk. There is no reason to expect Skrulk in this matchup. Ikit Claw is very dangerous and very good here. On that Doom Wheel, he does the exact same thing that the Doom Flayer is supposed to do, which is go up the center, cause a lot of havoc, force the Carnosaur or big dinos or cavalry or whatever to commit, then the Warp Lightning Cannon can shoot it up. So, and he has Howling Warp Gale too, which is good against Pterodons, it's good against 10 and 1 if he's flying on that Ripper. So Ikit Claw is very good here. The problem was, even if I killed 10 and 1, he's 1200 gold, so not expensive anyway, not generating a ton of value, but he already has secondary leadership Bastion in Lord Croak. So his army's not going to mass route anyway, even if I kill him. The only other option to Bubonicus was Croak, and that's what I chose to target, but he has 25% magic resist and a huge HP pool, so I'm not netting massive value from that spell no matter what. Other issue is for the Warp Lightning Cannon that just got taken out by the drop rocks. I did not know that the rocks would do that much damage to the crew itself. I had not seen that, so that was surprising to me. That was a really good move from Felkon. And then, of course, we're going to get to see the Deliverance of Itza here, which will absolutely demolish the rest of my Council Guard. I actually thought that spell, the symbol on the ground for it, was another drop rocks. So I didn't dodge out of the way, because completely out of the way, because I was like, oh, I'm already not standing on top of it. I'm not going to get hit by those rocks. Not a big deal. I'll just stand and let them miss and I'll be good. But no, that was actually a Deliverance of Itza, which was a problem, obviously, because now my Council Guard are out of the fight. But like I said, Croak has 25% magic resist. He has a huge HP pool. I'm not going to get a ton of value if I use Liber Roboticus on him, but he's the only good target, so I use it on him and do some damage anyway. The other issue was for that cannon, which again is already taken out, but it does magic damage, obviously. And besides that 25% magic resist, Croak has 40% missile resist. He is a horrible target to snipe out with the Warp Lightning Cannon, so I decided not to shoot at him because it literally takes 10 full volleys to kill him, and that's if you don't miss very many shots. So I was like, there's no purpose in doing that. Like, if I shoot at him with a cannon, I'm not getting any value there, so I just didn't do it. What I did there is 10 and 1 dove in on Skrulk trying to goon him, and the A-bombs are actually right nearby, and I summoned some clan rats directly behind 10 and 1 to tie him down, and then we're going to beat the crap out of him, which is, I mean, look at his HP pool. It's dropping like crazy. 2 A-bombs and Skrulk are going to goon 10 and 1 on that Ripper pretty easy, and with that summon behind him, I was thinking I might be able to tie him down and kill him here, which would still be good, but of course, we still see Lord Croak casting Deliverance of Itza over and over and over again. And the crazy thing about that spell is that it does 0 damage to allies. So you can be as blobbed up as you want with your skinks and all that stuff. It's not going to do any damage to them whatsoever. I believe the top tier Deliverance of Itza spell is 18 Winds of Magic. So the one that one-shot my Council Guard, yeah, that one is about 18 wins. Now, one of the crazy things here is that HPA, the Hell Pit Abomination, because he has 4 Pterodon Riders with the Javs, or maybe it's, no, I think it's 4. I thought he brought 4. Pretty sure he brought 4. They're doing an absurd amount of damage to my A-Bomb, like an absurd amount. The Javs are a perfect counter pick to that A-Bomb because it's low armor and they have high missile damage. So they are hurting it so bad. I did get a proc of Too Horrible to Die, but now he's just going to get chased off the map and I won't get much value generated out of that first A-Bomb. Now I still have the HQ in the middle, the Doom Flares, and Skrulk, and A-Bomb, the second A-Bomb are still doing good, but I'm trying to kill Croak super hard. It's getting pretty tough. He's got a lot of mass there, a lot of Kroxigors, a lot of things that will prevent the Hell Pit Abomination from chasing him down and killing him, but that's a juicy Rod of Corruption. I mean, that hit everything. He's very blobbed up at this point. That's going to net a lot of value for me, but things are obviously looking a little bit tough at this point because I've lost one of my Hell Pit Abominations anyway. I have lost a lot of my high-value stuff. The Council Guard are gone. The cannon didn't do very much for me. It's been a little bit rough so far, no question about it. So what I think maybe should have happened here is I dropped the Poison Wind Globadiers, which also didn't do very much for me because there were so many skinks going in. And I think that if I had 3 Slingers instead of that Poison Wind Globadier, that would have helped tremendously with this build. So what would have happened was I could maybe Howling Warp Gale, see, that's the thing though. I like Lord Skrulk, and I don't want to bring in a Warplock Engineer for Howling Warp Gale. Maybe just 3 slings in general would have been good, and just keep the rest of the build the same. But what you could do with the 3 slings is zone out those Pterodon riders and prevent them from sitting right on top of the council guard. They all have low armor, so we would have been able to kill them pretty easy with the slingers. Still, would have been hard to protect them. Would have been the same issue I had protecting all the weapon teams that I had in my earlier builds, because obviously he can dive bomb them, he can do all that kind of stuff. But if I get them to commit in melee, I've won, because they're not shooting my Helped Abomination, and they aren't doing the damage on my other stuff. They aren't dropping the rocks, all of that. So I think that slings would have been really useful here instead of the Poison Wind Clobadiers, just to help zone out the Pterodons a bit, and that probably would have been pretty beneficial. So drop those Poison Wind Clobadiers, get 3 slingers, and probably would have helped. Now Skrulk is getting gooned out by 10 and 1 because everything else has pretty much died at this point, and that will be army losses, and Felkon will take it. So he brought an amazing build. I was shocked at how well everything he brought countered me. If he had brought an Old Blood on a Carnosaur, or 10 and 1 with actual spells, or a Skink with Windblast to murder hordes of infantry, or a Fireleech Bola instead of 4 Jav Pterodon riders, cracking Skrulk's bodyguard HQ would have been really tough. Killing the A-bombs would have been really tough. Croak was that diamond in the rough, that deliverer of pizza who just had his way with me this battle. He just did whatever he wanted. Absolutely brutal. 260 kills is insane. A lot of that on really important units. And he can cast those spells from really far away too. So shutting him down this game would have been incredibly difficult, and I just was not prepared for it. I think he's going to be a staple in the matchup against Skaven. They don't have a lot of good ways of dealing with him, and I just was not ready for it. So I think I did end up killing him by the end of the game, but by that point it was already way too late. My build was flawed, no doubt about it, but not for the reason some people think. That Skaven build could have caught a lot of Lizardmen players off guard, a lot of Lizardmen builds off guard, especially on a new DLC where people were using Jezzails and weapon teams a lot. He would not have been able to sit on top of my cannon if I had Howling Warp Gale and Jezzails, or Howling Warp Gale and Slingers, which were super common picks in our practice games. So I don't know if Felkon guessed exactly what I was going to bring, or if it just worked out really well in the end, but either way, it was an outpick, and it was an outplay from the word go, so hats off to him. He brought a super good army to counter my strategy, and I was feeling pretty confident about it, and he played it to perfection. So my confidence was a little shot after that game, because I was like, this is the game where I feel like really good about what I'm doing here, and it's already worked super well in practice, so I don't see why it wouldn't work now, but he countered it, and he did really well. So Croak punished me hard, Pterodons punished me hard, went all downhill from there, but it was a great learning experience and a great way to see how effective flyers can be with the children of the old ones. Now, the second game was Dark Elves versus Lizardmen on Toothgrass Hill. I knew Felkon liked to rush, so I kind of figured it'd be a melee brawl on top of the main hill, and that's what it ended up being. Now, this was a matchup that I was much less comfortable with and much less excited about. I felt pretty confident about the first game on Chaos Waste, but this one definitely had me nervous. I personally feel like Dark Elves are a pretty tough matchup for Lizardmen. They have a lot of tools for killing dinos, they have a lot of bonus for Sludge, a lot of AP, and they're pretty annoying to fight against. Sotek was 100% right about the politics that goes into picking matchups for Everchosen. Felkon gave me the option of either Dark Elves or Wood Elves for game 2, and I had zero desire to play against Wood Elves because I knew it would be a Waywatcher spam, and I did not want to get kited, so I was like, whatever, let's fight Dark Elves. I know he'll rush with them. We'll maybe make it work. So Malekith on Seraphon is absolutely terrifying in this matchup. If he lands and you try to surround him with Cav, he just Soul Stealers everything that gets near him, tanks through the engagement, and waits for Cold Ones or Blackguard to come in and reinforce. Solar Engines and Ancient Salamanders don't really threaten him in the air, certainly don't have the power to force him to land prematurely, and so he and the other Black Dragon can be super patient, just kind of hover over everything and use their breath attacks whenever they want. A Carnosaur Goon Squad can definitely win against Double Dragon, but the Words of Pain and Soul Stealer make it really scary and pretty tough. So I went Cav heavy here. Primal Instincts is substantially better for the Lizardmen now, and for the Dark Elves. It gives +8 melee attack and +16% charge bonus. And Rampage only kicks in now at the 20% HP threshold, not 50%, which is huge. It means the unit is effectively dead once Rampage starts, so it doesn't matter. And if they somehow manage to stick around, the models that are left will actually be fighting way better than they did before. So Lizardmen Cav is 100% better than they were before. They're completely viable, so props to CA for listening to us on Rampage on that front, because honestly, it's not really a problem for their Cav anymore. it doesn't hurt their viability much in any way, shape, or form. But Cold One Chariots for the Dark Elves also got that buff, as did the regular Cold One Knights, which means their one downside as a unit is gone now. Cold One Chariots are horrifying, super tanky, incredibly versatile with that shooting attack, and they just blend infantry. They're a really mean unit, and he brought 2 of them. I think there's definitely something to be said for taking a bunch of Horned Ones, maybe 3 against Dark Elves as your cav force, because when they get their hands on Cold One Knights or Dragons, they just mulch them. And they'll actually win head-on engagements against Cold One Knights decisively, where the Spear Riders won't. But that's not what I went for here. I went for a cheaper cav force, but still a pretty powerful one. The other issue I had to worry about were Slaanesh's Harvesters, which bring their own Word of Pain and Soul Stealer to the battlefield. And they dumpster Saurus Cav in a 1v1 fight. Like, if they charge each other, Spear Riders and Slaanesh's Harvesters, it's not even close. Doomfire Warlocks crush them. So it's another variable, another unit that really makes the matchup, at least in the Cav fight, tough for the children of the old ones. Now, my plan here was to use the Cav to screen and trade decently with his Cav and Chariots, use the Old Blood to rack up some damage on the monsters, and give the Thunderous one time to rip through all the infantry. It has an ability called the Judgment of Usmak, which summons a Kolek Lightning Bolt every 15 seconds in a random spot around it. Can be extremely useful against swarm factions like the Greenskins or Skaven if it manages to make it into combat, because any infantry swarm faction will get around it and get demolished by all those lightning bolts getting summoned down. And the frustrating thing for me at this point was that bringing a bunch of Blackguard would have made a ton of sense to rush with on this hill. They're very mean in this matchup. They have immune to Psych, their AP, bonus for Large, but the Thunderous one would have racked up a tremendous amount of value against them. And again, it's not a unit you expect to see as Dark Elves, because traditionally, you don't want to bring big dinos besides maybe a Carnosaur to against them to deal with the Double Dragon. Druki have so many tools for butchering big monsters. So again, I brought units that were to counter his counter, but again, he didn't really care. He didn't bring a build that it made that much sense against. He did what he wanted to do. He brought no Dark Shards, he brought Double Dragon, lots of Cav and Chariots, and almost no infantry whatsoever. So pretty tough fight ahead. I brought his King Chief, completely stripped down on foot, really hard to snipe out, only cost like 450 gold, only had Harmonic Convergence and Wind Blast, and I was going to use that to maybe, well, I was thinking about like bringing Curse of the Midnight Wind, but felt like I was going to get plenty of value out of Wind Blast, which would be used to delete all the Dark Shards and infantry, and have a fun time murdering all that stuff. So I was like, I don't need to bring Curse of the Midnight Wind, it's fine. But again, no Dark Shards and barely any infantry. Now, I am aware of how Wind Blast works. The area of the spell past the cone is where the majority of the damage is done, but I was expecting to use it on stationary targets like Dark Shards in the back, not against Dread Spears, who are engaged with my Skinks on the front. And I couldn't really afford to Wind Blast the Dread Spears when they were engaged in melee, because Skinks will take much more damage from it, and if they're hurt, Dragons tear out them on contact. So I was being very conservative with my Wind Blast here, trying to do what damage I could, and kind of cast it when units were not engaged yet, or kind of clip them on the edge rather than just do a straight one up this flank, which would have then also maybe deleted the Dread Spears, but butchered my Skinks as well, and I didn't want to do that. So it kind of ends up being a bit useless for me this game, because I'm not using it on stationary targets or ones that aren't engaged in melee. And that was unfortunate, because I really wanted to use it on those Dark Shards, but he has none of them. So that was a big issue for me. Right now, I'm using my Cold Ones and my Old Blood to kind of move around. You can see the Wind Blast there. Like, I was trying to clip it. Like, I realized the cone goes way past, that area damage goes way past where the cone is. I know how to use the spell. It was one of those things where I could not afford to delete my own Skink doing so anyway, and I already was going to win the infantry fight because I have the Ancient Stegodon, and my only other spell is Harmonic Convergence, so I'm like, I can't use that. I'm not going to have 100% uptime on that spell. So while I am buffing up my Carnosaur with that, gotta use the Wind Blast somehow without deleting my Skinks. So not going to be effective, but better than deleting my own units as well. I'm already routing his entire left flank with the Thunderous one, doing pretty good there, and actually gooning up on the Black Dragon. But this is a micro mistake. So anytime you see Double Dragon play or that kind of thing with the Dark Elves and you have an Old Blood or a high value target, the second you see Malekith moving your way and drop a Word of Pain, you know he's going into melee and you know he's going to try to murder you. Thankfully, I have the Amulet of Itzel here for 66% damage resist, so he's not going to take much damage there, and I am going to pull out, and I responded to that relatively well, but I could have gotten out of there earlier and not even had to have used the Amulet at all. The second he puts that Word of Pain down on the Old Blood, need to pull out and run away and get some cav in there to reinforce. He did drop a Soul Sealer that generated almost no value there. I mean, a little bit, like it did damage to the Old Blood, but that was it. Wasn't blobbed up, so I handled that situation relatively well, and now I've got a back line that's relatively in good shape with the Old Blood, with all the cav together, so if the Black Dragons decide to land again, we'll be okay. And I've routed his left flank, coming in with the rear charge with the cav and with the Ancient Stegodon, and routed one of his Cold One Knights, which is what they were chasing off for a bit there. So it's not going horrible for me. I've taken some decent engagements. A couple micro mistakes here or there, obviously. He's getting some good breath attacks in. Balance bar a little bit in his favor, but overall, it's not going horribly. It's just tough. And now, things are going to get a little bit horrible, right? Because now the cav is a little bit depleted. The Black Dragons can go in without worrying too much about it. And my Cold One Knights simply aren't going to have the power to keep Double Dragon back from my Old Blood. And I've already used the Amulet. So, overall, I mean, I managed to extricate myself from the situation, get him out of there. But he's taken a lot of damage. And from this point, it will pretty much be downhill. Felkon has done a very good job of getting his Black Dragons in on top of my Carnosaur. Did what I could with my cavalry there, got some good rear charges off, but the combination of the Chariot play, the Double Dragon, and Felkon's really damn good micro and positioning is just going to be too much. Really nice move pinning my Carnosaur in place there with the Chariots, and then after that happens, Black Dragon gets in from behind. Try to reinforce. Oh, that's such a cool animation. I love that. Try to reinforce with the Ancient Stegodon, but of course this isn't really the job that it's meant for. It's meant to kill infantry. Won't do bad against a Black Dragon. Very tanky, does a lot of damage, but not meant to kill big dragons. And that'll pretty much be downhill. It'll be game from there. And Felkon will take the series 2-0. So both times he brought super good builds. I don't think that my builds in either game were bad at all. Again, these were builds that had plenty of success in the practice games against really good players. I mean, Aerocrastic, Romulan Dog, played against King of the Dead, played against Turin, won plenty of my games with builds that were similar to these ones. But I will say in both games, Felkon outplayed me and outpicked me, and when that happens, it's very, very hard to win. So congrats to him. I mean, he played exceptionally well. Tough out, tough person to play in the first round. Definitely one of the best players in the world right now. I mean, he's performed so well in so many tournaments. It's always going to be tough to play against a player of that caliber. In terms of builds here, there are a couple things you can do as Lizardmen. One of them that I was kind of toying with was a kite build with double solar engine and maybe an ancient salamander to just kind of run around the field, chameleon skink it up, and just kind of avoid engagements. But I think with the hill there and the way that map is set up, it could be a little bit difficult because if you concede the hill and you don't want to go up there, you kind of force yourself into a corner, and then the light cav can prey on you. If he had gone a bunch of Sinesh's Harvesters or Doomfire Warlocks and Dark Riders and a lot of fast movers, with that Double Dragon play, again, it would have been pretty nightmarish to fight against. And they can also go for Bolt Throwers, which will out-trade your Bastiladons. And if you want to do the double solar engine play, you got to bring Mazda Mundi to Apotheosis and keep them healed up. And I don't know. I think the matchup is pretty damn tough for Lizardmen. I know that there are probably better Lizardmen players than me. They can do really well against really good Dark Elf players, but if you're playing against Sooth, if you're playing against Felkon, and they're using Dark Elves, it's really tough. And I think you saw that later in the tournament as well. So, yeah, again, want to say congrats to Felkon for beating me 2-0, and it was a great learning experience. Learned a lot about this build and what works against which factions and which doesn't. There have been some pretty big changes overall and really enjoyable. So what I'm really excited to do is bring you some more content for the Prophet and the Warlock, show you a bunch of the new toys, and I'll be doing that as soon as I possibly can. Lots of multiplayer breakdowns, lots of analysis, lots of other content for Prophet and the Warlock on the way. Skaven and Lizardmen looking very good after this patch, and I think they're going to be a lot of fun to play. So hope you guys enjoyed this analysis, hope you enjoyed the breakdown, and I will see you all in the next video. Indypride, signing out for now. Have a good one, guys.